Captain Carole Hopson flies the Boeing 737 for United Airlines based in Newark, New Jersey. Prior to United, she flew for ExpressJet Airlines. After successful and varied careers as both a journalist and an executive, she followed her dream to become a pilot and to share the passion with others as a flight instructor, all while raising a family. She and her husband, Michael, make their home in Jersey City, New Jersey, with 2 college-aged sons.
Ooh.
You have 2 college-aged sons? Wow. Carole's undergraduate work at the University of Virginia was followed by earning her master's degree from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism, setting her firmly on the path of her early love, journalism. From journalism, Carole moved on to executive positions in the corporate world. Still yearning to pursue her childhood passion, and at the peak of her corporate accomplishments, Carole walked away from executive-level positions in order to learn to fly. Whoa.
Ooh.
Carole is the author of a historical fiction novel chronicling the life of a pioneer aviatrix, Bessie Coleman, entitled A Pair of Wings. Holt, a division of Macmillan Publishing, re-released A Pair of Wings on August 20th, 2024. Destined to become an American classic about an American icon who became the first American to earn a French civilian pilot's license, Essence magazine counted Carole's debut novel amongst its top 15 picks for summer of 2024, calling A Pair of Wings inspirational. Now, I'm reading it, and it is. Carole also founded the Jet Black Foundation, which aims to send 100 African-American women to flight school by the year 2035. As the aviation industry faces a shortage of pilots, the Jet Black Foundation encourages dreamers of every hue. In this age of widening opportunity, fewer than 150 women of African descent fly for the regional, military, corporate, cargo, or major airlines combined. Now, that's all of the different flying. That's all of the different genres in book. We call it genres, but in flight, all the different factions of flying. Military, regional, corporate, cargo, or major. That's combined. We're going to talk about that. The 100 Pairs of Wings project will begin in 2025 and will increase representation in the aviation industry. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphone, Captain Carole Hopson. Carole, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for that warm welcome. My goodness, you got everything in.
I did.
You did it all. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for rising early to come. I mean, I told the listening audience earlier, when I told you what time the show was, you were like, that's late for me. I was like, wow.
We have some pretty early shows. And I flew all night on a FedEx to get here.
Wow.
To make sure that I was here on time. So, thank you for having me.
I go outside, because I had to go out and get the gas. I go out there, a black Corvette sitting at the gate. I said, "Oh, go ahead, girl."
Well, I like to.
She's definitely a pilot.
I like to fly fast.
I'm sitting there like
I like to drive.
My mind immediately goes to Top Gun with Tom Cruise and the motorcycle, and I feel the need for speed. I said, "This sister feels the need for speed."
It's just a small treat. My husband said, after years of large wagons. Get you something that fits on your keychain. So there you go. There you have it. In any event, no doubt, Carole is a Renaissance woman. Now, you all know I have various guests on here. Some of them I coin as Renaissance. I've had Renaissance men and I've had Renaissance women. Matter of fact, I had wrote something about that in school, and my professor challenged me on it. He didn't challenge me. He was like surprised, that I even knew about it. Wow.
You know about Renaissance men? Yes, I do.
Well, you're one.
And so that's because in the essay, that's what I wrote.
You're one.
I said, I consider myself a Renaissance man and,
educator,
right.
Communicator.
Yes.
Leading the way, the name of your program. That is Renaissance. It's a definition.
Exactly. And that's the discussion me and my professor had. The people do many different things. Not only do they do them well.
That's right.
And so he got into the history of Renaissance, how that came about. And I was like, yep. Look. So he said, your essay was good. He says, you're the first student I ever had that, that brought up this whole notion of Renaissance man, Renaissance woman. I said, yes. But in any event, Carole, without a doubt, because I just read her bio, very similar in terms of leaving corporate. I left corporate to come into education.
Wow.
People thought I was crazy.
Well, I mean, a lot of people think that you're crazy to do things if it's not along the trajectory that we think is what people should do, right? So being brave is not necessarily just throwing caution to the wind. In fact, it's quite the opposite, right? It's managing the risk and doing what you're going to do, even though it scares you a little bit, but doing it anyway.
When I left corporate, because I was at AT&T, had all the perks going, travel, meeting famous people, because I was in the marketing department, consumer marketing.
Got any contacts left?
all the folks that were there when I was gone. In any event, I left and went into education, took a 50% pay cut. Folks are like, you're out of your mind. When I went into Air Force, because this is the way I kind of work. And I'm reading your bio thinking you probably work the same way.
Yeah.
And that is, why did you do that? Because I want to.
Right. I left a six-figure-a-year job.
Yeah, see?
And I made $16 an hour with my first job as a flight instructor.
See? Oh, wow. There we go. Why did you do that? Because I want to.
Why'd you do that?
When I went in the Air Force, I left AT&T at that point too. Went basic training, went whole lot. They go, why'd you do that? Because I want to.
Right.
Why did you? Because I want to.
Right.
You get up at 4 o'clock on Saturday mornings. You don't get paid for it. And you've been doing this. Why do you do it? Because I want to.
Well, I always say, right, so there's money and then there's wealth. And so wealth is doing what you want to do, when you want to do it. It's very different than a paycheck. Some people are literally a slave to their paycheck. But you really are free when you do what you want to do, when you want to do it. And there's a level of not just freedom, right? But there's a level of self-possession because you're doing what you want to do.
Correct.
On your schedule.
So in the bio, you said your lifelong passion was flight, even
Always.
as a child.
Always.
Where did that come from?
When I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and it's so funny when I say that, people look at me and they're like, are you sure you're really talking about the 60s and the 70s? And I say, yes. And so when I grew up, a little girl who wanted to play with airplanes, it was kind of weird. That girl, well, she's a nice little girl, but she's strange. She just wants to play with airplanes. And my dad would indulge me. Every Christmas I would get a Hess truck. And almost every Hess truck had a helicopter on it. And by the time dinner was ready, I had taken the thing apart and tried to put it back together again. But also as a little girl, I lived in, my parents owned a home in Philadelphia. I was born in West Philadelphia. I know you can almost hear the song, right?
That's exactly. I had Omar Tyree on a few weeks ago, and he's talking about West Philadelphia.
There you go.
Yeah.
Born and raised,
yes,
right? So my parents moved to a little town only about a mile and a half away. And yet it was literally a world away because education was different. And as a person who runs a school, you know how important those decisions are. And so my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, lived in New Jersey, right on the approach path of Philadelphia International Airport. And I would go there, and as a 4-year-old, I would lie in the grass and just look at planes. They fascinated me, right? Not just how fast they were going and where they were going and how many engines they had. But my grandmother would come out and she would lie there next to me in the grass. And she would say, where do you think they're coming from? How many people do you think are on board? Where are they going? And when are they going to be on another airplane to go on another adventure? And in me, what she did was stoke curiosity and stoke the need to understand a little bit of geography and maybe even a little bit of science. And so over the years, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, I would be 12 years old. And then by the time I got to be about 12 or 13, when we would go over to Nana's house for dinner, that was a way I escaped my chores, was to go out and look at the airplanes. I had to go ahead and do the graph. Remember that part, Nana? And I would go out and I would graph, which one was a 747, which one was a 757, which one was going where. And so later, much later, maybe about a year or two later, my grandparents took me to the National Air and Space Museum. And that was it. And regrettably, there just wasn't a path. My eyesight wasn't good enough to go and get a pilot slot. right? So thank you for your service. Thank you for, people say that and sometimes it rings hollow to me, but thank you for protecting our country and defending our liberties, right? And I would have loved to have done that, but I wouldn't have gotten a pilot slot.
Well, interesting you should say that, because I was going to go in after high school, and they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a pilot. Eyesight thing stopped me as well. So, and my father was like, well, listen, you don't have to go now. You can go, if you really want to go, wait until after college. You can go in as an officer if you choose, or if you don't, whatever. And so they were like, well, you can't fly because your eyesight. I said, well, I'm not coming in then. And so I deferred from high school. Right, same deal. I ultimately went, like I said, I was working in corporate when I left to go do the military.
Wow.
And I had scored so high on the ASVAB that the recruiter was like, you can have any job you want.
Wow.
That's a whole story. That's a crazy story there in terms of my recruiter and everything. That's really funny to me. Because she had not met me in person. She'd only heard my voice and saw my ASVAB score. So when we initially met, it was at a balloon show that they had a booth, the Air Force had a booth at. So I walk up and I'd seen her name was Sergeant Rudolph, Darlene Rudolph. I said, you Sergeant Rudolph? She said, yes. That's why I'm Marc Medley. And she just busts out laughing, just like you did just now. She just busts out. So she says, I look at her. She says, I have to apologize. She says, I heard your voice. I looked at your scores, and I just immediately assumed you were white.
I'm looking at you, and you might not be. I'm just saying. And
from the time I was left, from the time we met to the time I left, that was our running joke.
Yeah, I get it. Whenever you do something, right, that's not particularly, again, in line with people's expectations. In high school, I was a swimmer. I had really high test scores. And so, when I showed up for an interview, because back then they interviewed students,
right,
they were like, wow, yeah, no, I'm black. Wait a minute, hold on, newsflash. And then, there were certain people for whom that became a tremendous asset. So, to your example, my high school guidance counselor said, oh, don't go to, at the time they didn't call them HBCUs. I wanted to go to Virginia because my sister had taken me to Virginia on a trip. And my sister and her best girlfriend took me throughout the Shenandoah. And I thought, oh, my goodness. So I wanted to go to Hampton or to Virginia Union. And she said, with those test scores, I want you to go to University of Virginia.
That's UVA, right?
UVA.
I had a cousin graduate from there.
Yeah, a lot of cousins there. but I got it. What she was also saying was that there was more cash for me to go there. Mm-hmm. There was much more money to support students. And in fact, I don't want to get too far off the topic, but that has a lot to do with why HBCUs are in the position that we are right now in terms of, let's face it, when separate but equal was law of the land and HBCUs were founded on land grants and those kind of things, there were, 275 or 300 HBCUs. And then as money, which is often the determining factor, became available to African American students, what happened was many people, it's not that they chose or that they wanted to, but they did what they had to. And when they decided to take these opportunities, they did them in order to save their families money, in order to pursue programming that didn't exist otherwise. And so they did what they had to do. And in so doing, wound up at institutions that were not HBCUs.
Right. That's absolutely right. Now, I don't know, let me see, my cousin, Tiki Barber was there.
Oh, wow, that's right.
Okay, Tiki and his brother, well, my cousin played with them.
Wow.
My cousin played with Tiki and Rondé. All of them got drafted. Tiki and Rondé made it. My cousin got cut in the last round.
I'm sorry. Wow.
But Tiki went to the Giants.
That's right.
Rondé went to Tampa Bay.
That's
and my cousin, they got drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh, my goodness.
And he got to the last round.
Oh.
But he's a principal now, too.
That's great.
He's a principal.
Some of the lessons that you learn in sports are so critical to every single day. Wins, loses, how to take them both, how to honor your teammates, how to play with your teammates, even when you're mad at them.
That's right.
How to come back, how to, even though you're ahead, stay focused. What? I mean, there are so many lessons in sports.
No, it is. As a matter of fact, you just mentioned team. Now, I think it was United that used to have that ad years ago. I think it was United. If it wasn't, it was American United, but it showed all the different facets of what it takes for that flight to happen.
Ooh, I say it's a ballet.
Right, it is.
It's a ballet.
The baggage handlers, the mechanics, the pilots, the rampers, the
gate agents.
Yeah, right. It's a whole.
Service,
that's
the
a whole.
Flight attendants,
yes.
The load planners, the fuelers. We are the symbolic piece of what people see. But for every one of us, there are 100 people who make that flight happen.
Right.
And here's what I love that we're jumping right into this. But let's say, Mark, we meet, and within 45 minutes to an hour of meeting, learning how many kids or what family you have or you're a spouse, if you commuted, if you drove, we're going to get a 187,000-pound airplane ready to go. We're going to push back from the gate. We're going to taxi to the runway, and we're going to take 190 people somewhere. Hot diggity dog.
I know that's right. And it really is like a symphony. Like I said, I don't know if it was you all or which, but that was the advertisement. And it was showing all the different parts. But going back to what I was saying in terms of whenever I got in terms of the scores, they said you can have any job. Not to mention the recruiter was black, by the way.
Oh wow!
So but they said you can have any job, and they're going down the list. I'm saying no. So finally they get to. She said, "Well, we do have one more, but we don't think you would be interested in that based on your child." I said, "What is it?" They said, "Jet engine mechanic." And so I said, "Right." My question was, will that put me around the aircraft? They were like, "Yes." I said, "I'll take it." And that was the one. And my time out there on the flight, like I worked on fighter jets with F4s. F4s. Then ultimately we switched over to KC-135s, which is, I'm trying to think the equivalent, 707 or one, I'm not sure which one.
I'm not so good with the conversions, but that's probably
the KC-135 is somewhere around in that area. But anyway.
That was a big one, right?
Yeah. That's the one we use for refueling. And so at the end of my career, that's what I was working on with the engines for those. But
I wish I had known that, because that little jet engine I bought you for your keychain, I want to say that's a 7.3 engine.
Oh, it might be 7.3. The NG, okay. Either way, I'm just happy for it, so I don't care what it is. But yeah, it's interesting again doing more than one thing. Going back to that, because you started out in journalism.
That's right.
So how did things go with journalism?
So it's funny. I think when your background is eclectic and you acquire certain skills, they can be foundational. So, for example, my husband always says there are like 3 foundational skills to have. 1 is a foreign language. 2 is something to do with journalism or questioning, right? And then the 3rd one might be engineering or mathematics. So people talk about STEM all the time. I like to talk about STEAM: science, technology, engineering, aviation, math, and medicine. And to me, those are jobs, as my mother once told me when I was a little girl. Go find you something that people are always going to need. We're always going to need science. We're always going to improve technology. Engineering, that's at the key of both of those things. Aviation, my goodness, for the first time in history, there is a level of demand that there has never been. My sister calls it revenge travel after COVID, right? I'm going. Daggone it. I'm just going to go. I'm tired of Zoom. When we talked, I said, geez, I don't want to do another Zoom interview. Let me go meet Mark. He has this great energy. He seems so fun. He's been doing this program. Let me get myself in there. And there is something about the human connect that cannot be replaced.
That's correct.
We're social.
That is correct.
Some of us are a little antisocial, but we're still social at our core. And we are always going to seek that travel. It's not the same when you do a business meeting on Zoom as when you go to Narita and meet your colleagues
Correct.
from Japan. it's not the same.
That is correct. So, listening audience, I hope you've been with me since 6, but I definitely hope you've been with me since 7, because my guest this morning is Carole Hopson, a Renaissance woman to the second power. And I say that because she's the captain in the airline. She's a pilot, and she's also a journalist, as well as she's an author. And she's a mother and a wife and all those things. All that comes into play. And so I tell you all the time when I have a Renaissance person on, for those of you that if you want to be an accountant for all of your days, do one thing and that's it. I am not mad at you. That's your thing. But for those of us who go out and pursue different things, that's who I classify as Renaissance people, that we go out, and people really do think we are like nutty or crazy. But the truth of the matter is, like she says, this is the thing about people's perceptions. People get annoyed or aggravated when we don't fit their photograph of us.
That's right.
That's a photograph they have.
That's
so when we don't fit into what the picture of us ought to be, that's when they start getting annoyed or they start hating or they start whatever the kids call it, haters or whatever. But I've always been one that I've always done different. It's their photo, it's their picture.
Right. So it's a snapshot.
We don't
However,
fit their
we're
snapshot.
moving pictures.
Right.
And there's a lot of content in that moving picture. And I love that you talk about that, because what was fascinating to me about Bessie Coleman was that she was a Renaissance woman, and she was also something that was peripatetic. And I remember when my first editor, whom I hired to read my book, he said she was peripatetic. And back then, so I've been writing this book about maybe 7 or 8 years. So I started, let's go back, probably 2010 to write this book. And back then, when you started to type something and you could hear it.
That's right. That's right.
There was no silence on the keyboard, 15 years ago. And so I was looking up peripatetic because I didn't know what that word meant. And what it means is that you are in many places, or you are able to do many things at one time, which gets to the core of what you're talking about. And what was fascinating to me, and I would love to share this with your listeners, is that Bessie Coleman was 2 years ahead of Amelia Earhart. She was, let me just say it again for the people in the back pew. She was 2 years ahead of Amelia Earhart, 20 months. And when Bessie went over to France to learn how to fly, it was because she had no options in the U.S. Correct. And so she learns French at night in Berlitz School in Chicago. Where was she born? She was born in Atlanta, Texas, and grew up in Waxahachie, Texas. And so we just talked about it, tenacity, someone who has determination, someone who has so much stick-to-itiveness, and a little essence of resilience. And Harvard University says that resilience, one of the components of it is optimism. Correct. You must be optimistic, or else you don't believe that tomorrow will be better.
Correct. And
so there are certain people who are just hardwired for optimism. And she was. Her mother was born a slave, and she was born in 1892, when the Wright brothers made their first flight on December 17th, 1903. She was 11 years old. And I can only imagine that as a girl who was born in Texas to a mother who had been enslaved, a girl who grew up picking cotton, who grew up as a
It is phenomenal. It really is. I mean, to think of the times and to think, again, race, unfortunately, race is a social construct. However, it has influenced everything.
It is.
All right. So as Carole is saying, for Bessie to come through during that time frame, and first off, to even have the thought of, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a flyer.
I want to fly.
I want to fly. Carole's book is A Pair of Wings. And in the book, it is a novel. It is based on, as she's describing, the life of Bessie Coleman.
Pioneer aviatrix.
That's right.
Icon.
And this is going, and this is, again, we have to keep in mind, women were only just granted the right to vote.
That's right, white women.
Right.
1920.
That's right.
That's right.
So we're talking Bessie now talking about being a flyer during that time frame where women, for the most part, were not even
they weren't driving.
Right. Exactly. That's where I'm going.
They weren't working.
We're talking about women
outside
for the most part, an afterthought.
That's right.
For the most part. And now this is a woman, a little girl that's coming, a black little girl, mom's slave, that she's coming through saying, I want to fly.
I want to fly a plane. Can you imagine?
It's mind-blowing.
It's otherworldly.
It is. It really is.
And here I am, almost 100 years later, wanting to do the same thing.
And the numbers are not that much higher. That's what we were talking about before we went on the air. All right, first off, the percentage of African-American pilots in and of itself is low.
Yeah.
And then when you cut it and say African-American female pilots.
I'd love to give you the numbers.
Please, I want you to give me the numbers get even lower. And then when you say captain.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not like the flight officer, first officer or the flight engineer or something. We're talking the captain being a black woman or African-American woman. That has to be almost zilch. And you, by all means, share the numbers.
So here they go. There are about 150,000 people who fly for a living in this country, right? And that's military, that's corporate, that's low-cost carriers, that's major, that's regional, about that number. Every single year, because we have an aging workforce, mainly because our workforce has been a pipeline from the military, which has been an amazing stock of pilots. But because they're aging and because we're aging out, each one of the major airlines retires 1 to 2 pilots every single day. There's 3 major airlines. So just do the numbers really. See, 365 days, let's just say it's one person. So let's just pick an easy number, 400, 4, 8, 12. So 1,200 people every year are leaving the workforce. Very senior people. And so at the same time with that revenge travel, as we talked about, right? So you have a pilot shortage. Of that number, of the 150,000 people, approximately 2.5% are Asian, 2.5% are Latinx, and 2.5% are African American. Roughly 7% are women. Those numbers have not changed in 30 years. And so it's not just that we need black pilots. It's not just that we need white pilots. It's not just that we need women. It's that we need more. And what I think is that we need to start looking at talent pools that we have never mined before. Why? Because the military is not training pilots like they used to. Those coveted pilot slots that we were talking about earlier. Well, we're just not training people the same way that we used to. And so therefore the pipeline has dried up. The need has increased. And then siphoning off those STEAM graduates that we talked about are people who are going to be doing UAS, unmanned aircraft systems, because those are important. And why are those people important? Well, just ask UPS and FedEx. Just ask the motion picture industry. Just ask realtors. They're using those people like left and right, not to mention the military. So those folks who ordinarily would go into, forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, man the pilots, right, or flying airplanes, are now being siphoned off for all of these other very hungry industries.
Now, you led me to a point in terms of Maverick. In Maverick.
That's the landscape.
In Top Gun Maverick, the movie starts off with the general talking about, we're not going to need pilots.
Ooh.
That,
How about that?
Things are going to, they're going to fly themselves. Now, I don't like the automated cars, the cars that don't, the driverless cars, and I'm certainly not going to like a pilotless aircraft. Because if you know anything about aircraft, everything is a redundancy. Everything in terms of aviation and aircrafts is multiple redundancies. There's always, if this fails, go to that. If that fails, go to this.
That's right.
All right.
We've learned our lessons are in blood.
There's a reason why you have to have the humans in there.
Yeah. I want to take off on that just for a second, no pun intended. But many times I say this, and I say this about Bessie Coleman, that early pioneers got the test before they got the lesson. Let me say it again for the folk in the back pew. You get the test before you get the lesson.
Right.
And those redundant systems have been our checklists, have been written in blood. They've been written by experience. My mother used to say, experience is the best teacher. And I say, the airplane is an excellent teacher, but it's a poor classroom.
Yes.
And so, to your point, we have to do something so that we're ready for the next gen. And we're not ready. We've seen that with all of what's going on right now. We need to look at talent in a place where we've never looked at it.
So what do you, and that's one of the questions I was going to ask, what do you say to kids in terms of, if I don't know, are kids dreaming like you dreamed of being a pilot one day? Is that something that kids are saying, I want to be a pilot?
So you know what? I thank you for that question because, okay, so I started the Jet Black Foundation, and our goal, it's a 501c3 organization that our goal is to send 100 black women to flight school. Why 100 black women? Because I think we're built for this mission. I do. And I also think that we're a talent pool that's never even been considered. And if we had been, our numbers, and let me get back to that in a second and tie together 3 or 4 loose ends we got going on. Because you and I could talk about so many things, honey. We got a pot simmering over here and a pot simmering. Let's put the meal together.
That's exactly
Let's put the meal together. So let me just say this. So then the number of black women who fly, we're less than 150 when you combine all that. Black female captains, to get back to your earlier question, we're probably less than 2 dozen in the country. Why? It's not that we can't do the job. It's not that the airplane doesn't know. The airplane doesn't care. Really. I mean, the airplane's not thinking about it. Right? So the problem, it goes all the way back to how we started this conversation. It's about how people put people in. Well, you know what? We need talent. We need talent of every hue. We need talent. And so we need to look for it and mine it and prepare it. Pilots are not just, we get them out of a box. They are made, they are minted, they are burnished, and they come along their lessons. And they have mentors, and they're like every other profession that has an apprenticeship, and that we grow strong professionals. And there is a career path. And if that career path is not exposed, or you're not exposed to that career path, you told me about how you took your students to a baseball game.
Correct.
And it was the first baseball game.
For many of them.
And when we go back, and I want to get back to your question about, do little girls and little boys dream about being pilots? So let's go back to what you and I talked about right before we got on air. And you said to me, I was surprised at a show of hands of how many students said they had never been to a baseball game. When back in the day, the Negro Leagues were a social activity.
Correct.
That you didn't miss in Philadelphia, in Kansas City, in Chicago. Right? The Giants, the Braves, the what? You didn't miss it. And then you talked about it all week till the next game.
That's right.
And why? Because our media was not quite like it is. And don't get me wrong, I love our media. I'm not an anti-media or anti-phone person. I am not. But I want to get back to something you said. The little boys and little girls dream about flying. The sense of wonder has diminished. Why? Because we get them, because they're not exposed.
Right.
Back in the day, we would sit on the top of a Chevy and watch airplanes take off.
When I was a kid, this was prior to the whole security thing that we had to go through. My mom and dad would take us to Newark Airport, and you could go out on the deck.
Diggity dog.
You could go out on the deck.
Ooh, I
and
get
you could,
chills.
right, you could watch them come and go. And they would do that. I was in my glory. Then all the security things came into place where you can't go beyond the gate. Yeah. But there was a time at Newark Airport, you could go outside and just stand on the deck and watch the planes come. You didn't even have to have anybody that you were picking up or dropping off.
Holy
you could just
smokes.
go down there Go stand on the deck, watch the plane. My mom and dad would take us down there, and like I said, I was in my glory.
And think about this. There was a time when you would get on the airplane, and don't get me wrong, airplane travel back then was not like it is as common as it is
Correct.
today, right? So not as many of us flew. So, and we'll get back to that pot that's simmering. But, you know, the door would be open. You could look inside. Oh my gosh, look at all those buttons. Look at all those lights.
Yes.
Ooh, boy, oh boy, oh boy. Those men are very important in there. My first flight, I was 1. Don't remember. The next time I flew, I was 12. And the next time I was 13. And then there was a huge gap until I was probably, 17 or 18. And I remember on the first flight, my mother took me to Bermuda, which is where she grew up as the daughter of a pastor. Her father had a charge in Bermuda. So she got all these amazing friends that she went to go see and to share my 12th birthday with. And I remember getting on the airplane and saying, oh my God. So the thing I had been watching from the grass, I was now on.
In and on. That's right.
The preposition had changed. And so now I was a part of what I had always longed for. And when I say it, the little girl in me weeps a little because it was still so out of reach.
Right.
And then the next time I was 14 and we went to Montego Bay, Jamaica. And it was the first time I had ever seen a black man as a pilot. And one of our very good friends, our mutual friends, right? When my good friend, Joe, and you know Joe from, Captain H from.
I do, because he came and spoke to my school. He came and spoke to my students a few years ago. And I've told you, audience, that when Captain Hayes came, I was worse than the kids.
Joe Hayes,
I was
colleague
all
at
over the
United, my mentor, my friend. And so, I hadn't seen a Joe Hayes until I was on Air Jamaica. And it was a black man, but he was a man. And it just seemed impossible. It seemed silly, even though I had been to the air and space, even though that's what I wanted, even though my little girl, exciting up and down, jumping up and down, that unbridled sense of, oh my goodness, I want this so, even though that was alive and pounding in my heart, it just seemed so ridiculous that I wanted that. It seemed silly. Now, I went to University of Virginia. I went to University of St. Louis in Madrid. I went to Columbia University. I got my master's degree in journalism from arguably the best journalist school in the world. One of the most amazing skills that's transferable. And you asked me this question, so let's get another pot to the front. One of the questions that you asked me was, what skills or that eclectic background, how did that transfer? Well, it was the ability to ask some basic questions. And as a journalist, you ask the best questions because you're insightful, because you're very interested, you're very curious. And so that sense of curiosity, that sense of wonder, it comes together in a traveler, in a person who is always who always has voyage at the front. That sense of when you are on your overnight in Costa Rica and looking for that volcano that, is sometimes dormant. but your sense of travel, your sense of wonder, your sense of you are part of a bigger world. For those of us who've been fortunate enough to have children, your children, you bring into this world. How are you connected? Of the 53 or so countries that are on the continent of Africa, which one did I hail from? Right? Which one? And you come by way of the Caribbean. You come by way of the South. How did we get where can I go and look? And when I began writing the book about Bessie Coleman, I knew it had to be historical fiction because there were so many things in her life that we had gaps. She was too busy living to write all them down. Part of the journey is journaling. And she did some parts of, their letters that we have. There are some things, evidence of what places that she had been, mainly in newspapers. And that took me back to the journalist in me. And there were so many things that I found that were fascinating. Ooh, it makes me want to cry. About a woman who lived 100 years ago and roamed this planet in pursuit of the impossible. And at the root of that word is the word possible.
Correct.
Hot diggity dog. She just captured all of the things we talked about. My sense of imagination, my sense of wonder, my sense of curiosity, my sense that this world has a place for me, even though I'm told I don't belong, even though there are multiple messages that I don't fit. I'm going to make my place, and I'm going to make room for others.
Oh, absolutely right. And she's doing just that because, again, I'm going to go back to your Jet Black Foundation. That's what she's doing in terms of that foundation of preparing African-American girls to become, because the goal is 100 African-American girls become pilots by 2035. All right.
Ooh.
Now, I encourage you to look up the foundation, one, and I encourage you to donate. I donate.
Ooh, thank you.
So I encourage you to do this. I'm not going to force you. I can't mandate it, but it is
give me some skin.
It is a worthy cause. It very much so, because for a lot of different reasons. And one of them, Carole just talked about in terms of, one, folks saying what you can't do. Or to put you in a box to say, no, you can't do that because you're a female. Now, I have daughters. I could not buy a boy. The audience knows that. But anyway, I am all girl. And I have never, ever told them what they could not do because they were female. So I am a big encourager of that because, again, like she said, the plane does not know who's sitting behind that yoke, who's sitting behind.
But I tell you one thing we do know, and I'm grateful to you because your girls have you as a dad. Hot diggity dog.
There has not been one thing they ever wanted to do. That's no, you can't do that because you're a girl.
That's so crazy. And I told you, my dad gave me these Hess trucks and the helicopters, and he would change the oil on the car. He's, come on out here, girl. Here, hold the distributor cap while I'm doing this.
Absolutely.
I'm changing the spark plugs. Hold this.
Absolutely. Back in the 70s, it was this whole thing when the women were burning bras because they wanted to do, truck drivers and climb telephone poles. And I never understood, well, why can't they? Why wouldn't they be able to do that? Why?
Now, see, here's the thing. So many of the women, I think, the symbolic of the, burning of their underwear and stuff. So it wasn't just that they couldn't drive trucks or change oil or whatever, but they wanted to be paid for it.
Correct. Well, now, all right, now you went down another road because female pay is still not on par with male pay.
It's not. So, and black women are even further from that. So, and so I said this the other day, and it was some interview that I had, and one of my colleagues said, I heard you on that interview, and I beg to difference, because right now, as a captain at a major United States airline, you make, let's say, 7-year pay, captain pay, on a 737. There's a scale. And so does another 7-year captain who's white, who's male, who's Asian, who's Latin. I said, yes, indeedy. That's our union, which I pay 2% to everybody a year. Thank you very much. And I adore our union. But let me be clear. Because of the circuitous path that many of us take to get there, that 7-year pay comes much later in our lives. So that while you're getting 7-year pay at age 30, I'm getting it at 60.
Wow.
And that contribution from the company to my wages for my 401k is completely different because it's amassed over 3 decades longer that you had than I did.
Correct.
So it's not that the pay isn't the same. So when we finally do get pay equity, often it's at a different time in our earning. So that the earning and the buying power is changed, and that relationship to our income, to our freedom to do talk about bringing that pot to the front, to do what we want when we want. That's wealth.
Absolutely. Listening audience, once again, I hope you've been with me since 6. I really pray you've been with me since 7. I told you the interview was going to be entertaining, informational, educational. It was going to be all of that and then some, because my guest this morning is Carole Hopson, Renaissance woman. She's a captain for United Airlines as well as journalist and author. Now the whole thing with the journalist thing makes sense in terms of the book. In terms of, is it Mr. Abbott?
Yes, Abbott. Robert Abbott.
Robert Abbott. Okay.
Robert
so because I know the characters in the book. There's Jesse. There's
That's
Abbott.
Right.
There's Bessie, and then Bessie's
So you
friends
brought him up. Let me give it to you real quick. Let me give it to you real
ahead.
quick. So Bessie Coleman, we did this real quickly. You know, she's born in Atlanta, Texas, grows up in Waxahachie, Texas. This is an amazing young woman who comes of age at a time in our country's history where women, right, are struggling for the right to vote, and she wants to fly. Well, she winds up deciding that she's going to go to college. She goes to one semester at Langston University, and she can't afford to stay. First in her family to go. And so she comes back to Waxahachie, and then she says, I'm not going to be able to do what I want to do here, so I've got to go. And she goes as a single female in the teens to Chicago. And in so doing, she becomes one of the few women, in fact, the only woman in the world, as the Los Angeles Times said in 1923, to be at the dawn of aviation and the dawn of the great migration of African Americans from the South to the North. And so when she gets there, and by the way, the Great Migration, as Isabel Wilkerson defines, starts at about 1915 when Bessie gets to Chicago. And it goes all the way to 1975. And in that time period, 6 million African Americans from the South, agricultural South, moved to the Industrial Revolution of the North. We're right here in Paterson, New Jersey, where in order to get here, you pass factory after factory after gorgeous factory after these amazing brick factories in which ammunition and materials and silk and all the kind of things that fueled an industrial revolution were made right here where we sit. And so
No, that's correct, because she's absolutely right. I mean, we had the Colt revolver, we had the submarines, we had the silk, we had the factory. She's absolutely right. That's Paterson, New Jersey.
And we needed labor.
Yes.
In order to make that happen. And after slavery, Black Americans were either in the South as sharecroppers, or if they had enough stamina, they made it to the North. And so when you think about our families and you say, well, Carole, where's your family from? And I said, well, I have Caribbean and I have Southern. So my Caribbean people were from Barbados and my Southern people were from Georgia. Oh, okay. Well, your people came up through, North Carolina and then to Virginia and then finally to Philadelphia, where my parents settled, and New York. And then if you looked at, say, Mississippi, Alabama, and then maybe the edge of Georgia, but certainly Texas, those Black people went up to Chicago, to Detroit, to Gary. Why? Because of our trains. And so if I spread my fingers, listeners, I have my hands spread like I'm gonna, grab something. And so if I spread my fingers, it was the web of the trains. How African Americans came up from the South to the North. And when Bessie gets to Chicago, she becomes a manicurist of men's nails. It was a great job to have. You met people, you manicured nails, right? And you're in a barbershop. Pretty girl in a barbershop. I know that's not so popular to say today, but that's just how it was. And it still is. We just don't want to say it, but she was a beautiful woman, and she was in a men's industry, and men would come in for a haircut, and they would talk a little bit about women, but what did they talk about back then? Sports, jobs, where to live. And the barbershop was like the church, The restaurant,
That's
you know
right.
about that.
That's
They were
right. That's right.
institutional. That's where you had the new lead on the next job in the Industrial Revolution. That's where you had the lead on the next cold water flat. That's where you had the next lead on where in the heck you were going to get your next meal from. And sports, it was all about baseball. Chicago Giants, Rube Foster, right? So you just mentioned some of the main characters in the book. There was Jesse Binga, the first black banker in Chicago. And he was part mogul and part gangster. Carried a sidearm, and he had money from a certifiable gangster. And I like to say that he took that money, which came from the seediest side of Chicago, and he was able to put a picket fence around the dreams of porters and maids, people who worked in factories.
And I'm glad Carole's bringing all this because it is a novel, but you will learn some history in there.
That's right.
Just like she's talking right now is exactly what you'll learn as you read the book. You'll learn some of our history. Now, the history is factual.
Oof.
Even though the book is novel, the history in and of itself
right.
is factual.
Right.
And so it is a very good read. It's a very detailed read because I started reading it and I said, man, you really do pay attention to detail.
So you know what my challenge was as a novelist? So, okay, let me give it to you real quick. So the book is about Bessie Coleman's life, Pair of Wings, from age 24 to 34. She dies at age 34 years old. Yes, an airplane crash. And no, she was not flying, but we can get to that piece. But age 24 to 34, it's in 5 parts. It's a prequel. There's coming of age in Chicago. There's learning to fly in France, right? There's barnstorming, and then there's comeback. So, did I have a movie in mind? What are my goals? Book, movie, 100 Black Women in Flight School. When I get up in the morning, sweep my feet over the bed. Dear Jesus, thank you so much. Waking me up. Thank you for taking care of my children. Book, movie, 100 Black Women in Flight School. Clear. Clarity. Right?
I know that's right.
Clarity.
I know that. And it's fun because see when you read books for me, when I read books that do not have pictures in them, I put my own characters in there. And I'm trying to think of the brother's name because I remember texting it to her that immediately came to mind with Jesse. There was a character, I'm trying to think of his name because I've seen him in many movies, but immediately he came to mind.
Okay, so you're going to call it out so that they're going to call me. We're going to make a movie? Think of David Washington.
I got to go back to my text messages to see who it was. Because it's not a run-of-the-mill name, but he's very popular. It's just I don't remember his name. But I'll have to go back and see who it was. Because I looked him up. Before I text you, I actually went on Google to look him up and finally found him. I said, there he is. That's him right there.
I love that.
But, I mean, you start as you're reading through the book, characters come into your mind of who you. Okay, if I was casting this one would play this one would play that.
All right, who would you have? Who would you throw it out there? Maybe they'll call me.
I don't know because speaking of calling, because she's in the studio, if something she said, or if you want to shout her out and say, hey, 973-720-27. That's right, 2738 973-720-2738 if you want to talk to Carole or if you have a question for her. Because again, she is in an area not too many women are. That's certainly not too many black women are in terms of being the captain of a 737. All right. One of the questions I asked Joe was, and I asked Joe this same question, when you're sitting up there in the flight deck, it used to be called cockpit. When we got politically correct, they changed the name. It's flight deck. When you're sitting up there in the flight deck, do you even think about all of that's behind you?
Sure.
Do you really? Okay.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's like you have all this tonnage and people and so forth, and all that's kind of like at your command.
So this is what I say, and thank you for that question because it's a very profound question, and again, it's an insight to who you are because it's a very insightful question. So before I leave the hotel room, before I leave my home, because it's the first day of our trip, so let me give it to you real quick. So let's see, I'll have 1 leg, 2 legs, 1 leg. That's my ideal trip. But these days, just 2, 3 legs, 2, 3 legs, more legs than a spider. But you have a couple legs, right? Okay. And so this is what happens. You get a flight plan. And that flight plan includes, we call it an OFP, original flight plan. And that flight plan includes how much fuel we have, what's our weather, what's our route. What conditions will we be flying in? What conditions do I have that the plane, the equipment I have in order to fly the mission that I'm assigned? And then how many people? What's our load planning? All these things go into it. So when we get to the airplane, we do a walk around the airplane, right? We load the flight plan. We make sure that the fuel is accurate. Do we have enough food on board? Do we have enough refreshment on board? Is my crew ready to go? And then I walk up to the gate. I speak to the gate agent. I see if there are any specials, anything special I need to know about my flight. Then I walk down the jet bridge. And while I'm walking, I'm just thinking, okay, what are some of the critical things that are happening today? And we call them threats: personal, environmental, technical. And while I'm thinking about these things, right, and I was telling you earlier, I meet Jim or Bob or Bill. We're lovely to meet Sarah. And within 45 minutes to 1 hour, we're ready to take that airplane going. So I might, for example, know that there are X number of children on my flight. Where are we going? We're going to Orlando. So I'm going to have a lot of families on board.
Correct.
Right? It's going to smell like bubble gum up there in the place, right? Right? I'm going to have people who are managing expectations to get their kids on a vacation that they've been planning for 3 to 4 years. Where am I going? I'm going cross country to San Diego. I probably have a lot of families who can't wait to get there. I'm coming east from the West Coast. I'm going to have a lot of people who are going to be jet lagged. I'm going to Cancun. I'm going to have a lot of partiers. I'm going to Las Vegas. I'm going to have people can't wait to get there and spend all their money. So all of these hopes and dreams and expectations that are on the airplane. And then before we get ready to go, the gate agent comes down with our reconciliation report. How many people? What's on my manifest? How many SOBs?
Souls on board.
Go ahead, baby.
Yep, souls on board.
Right.
That's
SOB
right.
means SOB means a little something different to me. Souls on board. That's what it means. Exactly. Right? And so then, once I know how many souls on board I have, they're ready to close that door. And at that time, I go out and I use the microphone, the flight attendant's phone. And when I step out into the galley and pull that cord, just like the old telephones that used to be, and I make a joke of it every time. I have about 30 to 35 seconds of an announcement and a greeting. I often say, this is the same kind of phone that was in my mama's kitchen with this coiled thing. And my mom had the same thing. I couldn't pull it all the way out, so she had to hear what I was saying when I was on the telephone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. And at that point, everybody who has a phone, an iPad, earbuds, sometimes a book, they all put it down. Oh my goodness.
I know I would. I told her that. I said, oh, I know. Because I walked, first off, I had asked her that question earlier. I said, what is it like whenever the passengers see that you're the captain? Whenever, for a lot of different reasons, I asked that question because we know people. We know our country. We know our history. We know all of that. So for an African-American female to now walk out and say, I'm the captain, like what kind of reaction or what kind of response does that get? And that's exactly what she just told me. What you just said is what she told me. But I know I would be one of those for like a different reason. But not to mention, you have a wonderful voice. You have a great radio
Thank
voice.
you.
I can't imagine that on the PA in the plane. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Captain Hopson.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go.
This is your captain speaking. That's right. But so most of what I get, I'd say 95% of what I get is very positive. Very positive. And then, there's always something, right? But most of what I get is incredibly positive.
And it ought to be.
And it darn sure should be.
It ought to be. I mean, not to mention, like, if I'm a kid and I see that, especially a little girl.
Oh, boy.
Because that's the other thing when we were talking about my school. That's why I really got to have you come in as a guest speaker.
Coming.
Even though it's a all-boys school, they still need to see.
Oh, no, it doesn't
need. They
need to see women in the role.
Yes.
Sure.
But you never know. There's a little girl that may walk on your flight and see you and say, I'm going to do that.
But they say that.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
They say that. So two things have happened with children today. One is while they're looking at a frog in their hand on their phone instead of a frog in the backyard. Okay. So that goes to the sense of wonder, right? Even though that happens, what also has happened, this is the good, that kids are a lot more vocal about their wants and desires. When I was coming up, you didn't say what you wanted. You were pretty quiet. What are you doing? What are you talking about? Shh. Right? Quiet. But these kids today, they say, Mommy, I get it all the time. That lady, she's a... And they're waiting for somebody to fill in the blank. Because what they see, they can't believe.
Right.
That lady's a... Go ahead. You can say it. She's pilot. She's captain. What? Can I come up front? Sure, after we park the airplane, I put the parking brake, finish the parking checklist. Come on up, sit in my chair. What?
I know that's right.
And United is an amazing organization. I love United. I love the company. I love my colleagues. I love, people like Captain Hayes, who encouraged me, who was a mentor and very generous with his knowledge and praise and welcoming. So there's that. And United has the most women. We are, I believe, the most incredibly open and optimistic airline. And I believe that we are an airline of choice because, listen, we all have a product that we sell, and that's safe flight.
Correct.
But I think that we try our best. We try our best, since it's our core belief system, right? That we have, it's caring, first we start with safety, caring, dependable, right? And then efficient, right? And so these are things that we espouse and that we try to get to. And that's what we do, and I hope we do it well. I think we do.
Good morning. You are on the air, caller.
Mark, good morning. This is Wardell. You doing okay today?
Man, I'm doing awesome. All is well. As I always tell you, all is well. Thank you for calling. Whatever, you got a shout out or a question for Carole?
I got just a shout out. I cannot thank you and Captain Carole enough for this interview. I am loving every minute of it.
Oh, good morning.
Yes, good morning, ma'am. If you ever stop flying planes, your voice would be great somewhere else, anywhere else. I would listen to you. If nobody else, I would listen. As a father of a daughter and 3 granddaughters, just get your role in what you're doing now. It's just awesome.
Wow.
And again, I would hope that you're inspiring other young ladies to do what you're doing. Again, I just wanted to thank you guys for this morning's interview. It has been on point. It has been entertaining. It has been informative. So again, I thank you very much for all of it.
I thank you. And I'm so glad that you have daughters and granddaughters. And listen, just so you know, here in Newark, New Jersey, right, there is something that the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals has, and it's called an ACE Academy, Aerospace Career Education. And I want to give a shout out to the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, almost 50 years old. I like to say that was my fraternity, right? That's my sorority. It's run by a woman for whom I was the vice chair. She was chair. And under our leadership, my goodness, 2018, we started the Luke Weathers Flight Academy, which is the only affinity organization in the country to have a flight school. And we also started something called SOS, Sisters of the Skies, who are Black women commercial pilots. That's a designation. Professional pilots who mentor, who give scholarships, who unselfishly grasp the hands of those behind them.
So you know Teresa Claiborne.
That's my sweetheart. Okay, so let me just tell you.
Let
me just tell you about TC, Captain Claiborne. So Teresa has been a friend and mentor of mine for over a decade. And at her retirement luncheon, which was, oh my goodness, it's been a year now, I was sitting there and I was so moved. And they had these lovely souvenirs. I might have a picture of it on my phone. I was so moved. I took the luncheon souvenir program that had her picture on it. And she's sitting there with her arms like this, crossed, looking, so debonair and commanding. And I put it in my cap. And I like to say I got Captain Claiborne in my cap.
All right now.
And when you come into the flight deck, my cap,
right,
like everybody else's cap, hangs, right, and the inside is shown because you hang it so that the inside of your cap faces forward. And Captain Claiborne is in my cap.
All right. So what else? She's saying all that to say between your daughter and your granddaughters.
Come on now, I need one.
There you go.
Thank you for calling. It's very special.
Thank you so very much. Again, you have a wonderful day.
You
then,
as
Mark,
well.
enjoy your company. You got a great guest this morning.
Oh, thank you so much, sir.
That's super
Be
kind.
well, my friend.
All right, you too. All right, again, you all heard. I'll call between now and another 20 or 25 minutes or so. If you want to talk to Carole, if you have a question for her, feel free to give us a call, 973-720-2738. Wardell is one of our faithful listeners. I have a handful of faithful listeners. They listen every Saturday morning I'm on. Wardell is one of them. And so again, in terms of, this is a question I have for you. You can answer or not answer, but have you ever had a situation where the first officer was a male, you female as the captain, and they're like, I ain't got to listen to her, or this, that, and the other, or this, she don't know, she don't know. Have you ever run into that situation?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I answer every question you ask me. I answer everything.
No.
So, in that situation, I believe, as my mom used to say, if there's an elephant in the room, give him a name. Everything stops. The whole show stops. Remember we talked about the show being a concerto?
Right.
A ballet.
Right.
We love to talk about music. Why? Because you need so many parts to make a piece of music happen.
Correct.
Right? So everything stops. Hey, Bill, I think we're having a little problem. What is it? Now, there's the ultimate, which you can invite Bill off the flight deck and tell him that, you know what, you have to go. We're not going to continue. Safety is paramount. If we can't get along, then we can't fight an emergency together.
Correct.
So once you do that, as my mother used to say, elephant in the room, give him a name. Once you give that elephant a name, which is disrespect, which is lack of respect for authority, which is insubordination, which is anything. Now, those are severe, but anything even more mild than that, I'm going to call it a brief. Hey, listen, I'm going to get my little dog tag out. Because so much of what we do, whether it's pay scale or uniform or work rules, so much of it grew up with the military. So we brief.
Correct.
I brief my flight attendants before we get started. What's the weather? Are we over water? How long is the flight going to be? Is it going to be turbulent? That's it. I don't need to belabor things. And then I ask them, is there anything for me? So we start with that brief. And in the brief, right, with the flight attendants, then I have a brief with my first officer. And if I notice anything that's amiss, I give the elephant a name. Bring it on. Right? How can we handle how can we handle a sick passenger? How can we handle smoke in the back of the
Right.
How can we handle a problem?
Right.
If we're not going to be
That
on
is
this,
correct.
if we're not aligned.
Now, I have seen every episode of Mayday. There is not one episode of Mayday I haven't seen, if not multiple times. All right. So what she's talking about is crew resource management, CRM.
That's right.
In terms of they have to communicate they have to get along. Because as she said, if something comes up, you have got to be working together. You cannot be fighting. Matter of fact, as a part of a lot of the episodes about CRM is the first officer. And some of it was cultural.
That's right.
If you got into the Asian culture, it was the whole notion of, I can't approach them. But in CRM, you have to be able, the first officer has to be able to say,
speak up.
Right.
Advocacy.
Right.
Right.
Now, at the same time, that does not mean disrespect.
Absolutely.
That does not mean, that's not what we're talking about here. And I know she's had to have faced that some point during her career where you're going to get this cocky male that's like, I got to listen to her. Yeah, you do. She's the captain.
But you know what? I love how you put it, because CRM, I always say crew resource management. And there's 7 at United. We have 7 CRM skills, threat and error management skills. They're identifiable. We put what we're talking about in relation to one of those buckets. So I don't want to say, hey, I don't like the way that you're talking to me. I would much rather say, hey, listen, of our 7 TRM buckets, this one right here, I believe goes into communication. This one maybe goes to planning and decision making. How could we have planned that a little bit better? You know, in terms of our workforce management, how could I have given you a better set of skills to do, a better set of items to complete? So I want to put some of it back on me. So it's not, hey, you.
Correct.
Right? Because then that just sets up adversarial.
That's right.
Right? So giving the elephant a name doesn't mean, that you identify everything that person is doing. Because like anything, we're a team. It's two people that manage this little piece. And then there's a whole crew that makes us go. So I want to identify my piece first. And that I learned in 20 years of leading teams. And so if I don't use what I've learned, my experience, and I bring all of that in the flight deck, I bring in the journalist who asks questions, I bring in the business manager who headed up 150,000 employees in the learning organization at Foot Locker. I work for the National Football League. If I don't learn and if I don't use what I learned working at the NFL with all them men in a career where I am one of very few females, right? If I don't use those skills, what good is it?
See, this is going back to that Renaissance thing again. Not only Renaissance, though, but I mean, it's like pioneer, breaking down these glass ceilings, so forth and so on. That means a lot because, again, over the years, just like we start talking race, gender to a degree, the way it's been used, is also a social construct.
Right.
So to sit there and tell a woman that she can't do something because she's a woman, I've never subscribed to that. Never, like I said,
not with them daughters.
Right. I've never subscribed to that. Well, she can't do that because she's a girl. Well, she's capable of doing it.
And you have a wife, right?
Had to, but no longer. That's a whole nother story.
Episode number 2.
That's a whole nother story. Listeners are familiar with it, some of them are. But in any event.
Moving on.
Yes. So, but there is no such thing as because they're female, the gender is female, that they can't do something. So if you're breaking ground, I just heard the NFL, I just heard Foot Locker, you're breaking ground, so groundbreaker as well. But
and I want to make room for others.
Yeah, and there you go, because now this is getting back to Jet Black again. And I want us to go a little bit more into that to make sure listeners really understand how they can find it. At the end of the interview, I usually give you 5 minutes to promote, but we'll even get into that a little bit earlier. You were talking flight attendants.
Yes.
I'm connected to another flight attendant at United. She's on Instagram as Happy Fit Girl Dancer or something like that. She's a dancer. I don't know if you know her because Joe knew her.
I know.
Because whenever Joe is
What's
another
her name?
I have to look her up.
Okay,
because,
that's all right. That's okay.
Again, we were on Instagram together, and she said she's a United designer. I said, you know Captain Hayes? She's like, oh, yeah. So now she sends me a video of her, like some dance she taught him.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Well, I must say, we have some amazing flight attendants. I'm so grateful that they haven't asked me for that particular skill of dancing. That's one of the areas where
I think her handle is Happy Fit Girl.
Less of a Renaissance woman. But I will tell you this. I over the years I've spent many hours exercise and all that business. After my first baby, I weighed 300 pounds, 301. I lost 140 pounds.
Oh my God, bless you!
And
You've never known that looking at it.
Oh yeah. Then to celebrate, we had another baby. I gained 80, and then I stayed home with my kids for 14 years. So I want to do this real quick. So a lot of people say to me, oh my goodness, how in the world can women have everything? And I say, how can parents have everything? And I say, we can have everything. Oh, I don't know her by looking at her. She's lovely. But I may have had her on the flight. Honey, we do so many legs. I told you that. But I'll make sure I look for her. Oh, that's so funny. Well, she's got on our new uniform, and she looks lovely in it. United just changed our uniforms.
Oh, okay.
It looks fabulous. Fabulous.
Yeah, so she's again. Anytime I see you, and now I'm gonna do the same thing with you, just like I did with Teresa, just like I did with Joe. Anytime I see somebody from United, Captain Haynes, you know Joe Hayes, and so I hit her up one time and I said, Joe Hayes. She's like, yeah. So she sends me one of those little videos like that with her and Joe doing some kind of dance together.
Cute. Mercifully, they haven't asked me to do a dance. Thank you. That's one area I'm completely deficient in. But this is what I would say to you. So people say all the time, well, how do you have everything, right? How are you a mom? How do you fly? How do you write the book? So I say everything has a season.
Correct. And
I believe that you can have it all. It's just hard to have it all at the same time.
Correct.
So I love crab cakes and I love cheesecake. And other than when I weighed 300 pounds, I tried not to pound them back at the same time. So I like to have my crab cake and save my cheesecake and my chocolate cake for later. So sometimes, financially, you're unable to do what I was able to do. I've been very blessed to be able to have earning power and to have the ability to save. right? But why? Because I had a plan. Why? Because I had a goal. And I love to talk about this. People talk about their dreams. And usually when I do talks, the other day I was at the Alabama Aerospace and Aviation High School. And I was so honored as their inaugural commencement speaker.
Good for you. Congratulations.
13 students graduated that class. And they started out as 15.
Wow.
2 of them died. One from suicide and one from murder. Our communities are under assault. It's a moment. And I say to you this, that while we are in this moment, it's even more important to gather around our children, to make sure that they have a plan and a purpose. And I left them with a question. Young people, what impact do you want to have? Older people, or more experienced or seasoned people,
there you go.
what would you do if you knew you could not fail? What would you do? And the answer to me is you would gather around these 13 strong. And you can't fail, because look what you've done. Shout out to Reuben Morris, who, like yourself, is an educator. You have no idea the impact that you had on those young people by taking them to that baseball game. It's sports, it's social, it's entrepreneurial. It's education in its best form. Because education is not just a book.
Correct.
Although I hope that in my book, A Pair of Wings,
right,
one of the things that I tried to do was not beat you over the head with history. But when we mentioned the Pullman Porters
right,
and what they do, it was so important to bring that in as Bessie's brother, who was a Pullman Porter. When we talk about World War I, a war in which 9 to 15 million soldiers died. You served our country. 9 to 15 million people who served their country died. Most people can think of World War II. They're kind of fuzzy on the Korean War. They're kind of fuzzy on the Civil War. We can't even, because of our education, right? So let me go to because of our education. So I went to college. I went to graduate school, and I had never heard of Bessie Coleman until I went to a Women in Aviation convention, and a woman gave me a coffee cup. Her name is Captain Jenny Beatty at American Airlines. Jenny would become my friend and mentor of 2 decades. And she gave me that coffee cup with Bessie Coleman's picture on one side and 50 words, as I like to say, that would change my life forever. If she could do it 100 years ago, I could do it.
Wow.
And if I could do it, 100 more can do it.
Right.
And the Jet Black Foundation was born in order to do that. And I want to personally thank you for contributing to Jet Black.
I'm going to contribute again today. And
I ask your listeners to think about it.
I agree. And again, I'm going to give you the opportunity to give the websites and all that kind of good stuff to go there. I've been there.
And thank you.
And I've contributed, and I'm going to continue to contribute because it is, one, it's about education, it's about flight, and it's about women. So I got the combination there. So that's why I'm glad to contribute to that.
Thank you.
In terms of, because again, it is a worthy cause. It is a worthy, a lofty goal and a worthy cause, but so needed. Because see, not only is there a shortage in pilots, we have a teacher shortage now too.
That's right.
We're having, there's just shortages in everything. It's like, well, what are these people doing?
But it's a shortage in everything that's technical. We have more than what we need in some other areas. But when you start, and here's the thing, go to some of our websites to learn about how you become a pilot. There's 7 licenses, right? There's, the very first one is the hardest one, the professional pilot, the initial pilot certificate is the hardest one. 80% of the people who get the private pilot license, PPL, do not go on to finish more certificates and ratings. And we need to fix that. Probably by making sure that we get more people who are aligned to start with.
Correct. It has to be an interest because, like I said, I fixed jet engines for like nearly 10 years, for 9 years. And
great skill.
In terms of
also
knowing,
needed.
Right, in terms of knowing Bernoulli's theorem and knowing how the dynamics of how a plane stays in the air, I'm still, every time I see one, fascinated.
That's so great.
I mean, fascinated. I will look up in the sky right now, and I know, like I said, I know the theory behind it. I know lift. I know angle of attack. I know this. I know.
That's right.
But still, when I see an airplane, I am like just blown away. It's funny you were talking about as a little girl, you laid on the grass wondering where they were going. I have apps on my phone, and I was at a friend's house last weekend. And they were right. I think I texted to you. They lived right on the end of the runways at Kennedy. And they were going up, and I have the apps that actually told where they were going.
Oh yeah,
it would
Flight
tell
Aware,
you
that kind of business.
And I'm sitting there. I put the app on. Flight Radar 24.
Flight Radar, nice.
Flight Radar 24. And every plane that was coming, it would say if it was going to Lisbon, if it was going over to Italy, if it was going over to, because everything come out of JFK at that time of the night. It was around 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock. Everything was international at that point.
Long haul, right?
Yeah, those were long hauls. Mm-hmm. And it was Italy, there was London, I'm sitting there on the app watching each plane go over my head, and it would tell me where it was going. Yes, it really was. So it is something. Like I said, I take my hat off to you in terms of everything that you're doing.
Your hat is blessed.
But yes.
I love that.
Yes,
thank you.
By all means. And the fact that you're now opening the door and looking for young people to do that, to go into that field.
It's
because
critical.
I asked that question earlier about the responsibility of it. The building I'm in now is small because it's a small school, but I've had large schools. And there would be some mornings I would walk up to that building and I would just look up and say, oh, my God, I'm responsible for all this.
Wow.
I can't, and this is what I told Joe, I cannot imagine walking up to a 737 or 747 or 787 or any of those and saying, I'm in charge of this.
So I want to get back to one more pot that we had simmering, and I want to move it to the front burner. So I say when I'm in my hotel room, or when I'm in my dining room and I sit there with my flight plan and I look at everything I need to look at. What's the condition of my airplane and what fuel do I have and what's my route? What are the winds? What's going to take me over here? What are my considerations for landing over there? What am I thinking about in terms of our passenger load or who I have on board or where I'm going? And if at the moment when I sign for that release, when I sign for the SOBs, Souls on Board, when I sign for that release and I don't get a little pitter-patter in my heart, it's time for me to go.
That's right.
It's time for me to go.
That's right. And I'm going to tell you why. What Carole is saying is what I teach public speaking. And a lot of times people will say how they get nervous before this dress. You're supposed to get nervous.
That's right. It means it counts to you.
Right.
It means you
if
care.
You don't. I said, I would be concerned if you didn't get nervous because it's been my experience when you go into something cocky like that, that's when things mess up.
That's correct.
And so when you have that little bit, now once you get going, the pitter-patter goes, the flatter, the butterflies go, this and then once you get, but prior to like what she just said, you should have a little bit of nerves. Because, going back to sports, I use the example all the time. I said, trust me, every last one of those football players before kickoff got butterflies going on.
Absolutely.
After that ball is kicked off, the first tackle or this, that, and the other, butterflies are gone.
That's right.
But you should have that. So, that is good to hear. Because at the end of the day, the captains, the pilots, first officer, they are responsible for lives. Because you said it earlier. Maybe a good teacher, but not a good classroom.
That's right.
Because when a plane goes down, we've all heard the whole thing that it is safer to travel by air than it is by car.
Always, yes.
The only difference is when you have a car accident, you're talking 1 or 2 people that could be hurt or killed or whatever. When you have a plane crash, you're talking hundreds of lives at the same time.
Right. More on the ground if it happens.
Correct.
But we do everything we can to never even get there. And so part of that planning is to think and to plan before you ever get there. Part of the planning that goes in, that caring, dependable, efficiency, the safety that starts us off, those are 4 core pillars at United. So we spend time with our crew members making sure that that mission is appropriately, from the very beginning, is thought out. And
we're getting ready to go down to the last couple of minutes. I'm going to give Carole a chance to shout out anything that she'd like to do. The only thing she can't say is a dollar amount. I'm giving it. But she was talking about in terms of signing off. Whenever I was working on engines, all the mechanics, we had to sign off. Anybody that worked on the engine, we had to sign off on.
Right.
And they would let us know.
That's right.
Something happens to them, and we're coming back to all of you mechanics.
So I love that you say that, because we have a fellow who's in United. He heads up all of our mechanics. His name is Steve Dishler, the Dish, as I like to call him, and he takes people over to the terminal, even though the hangar is off the property, and he has them sit there and drink a cup of coffee. And there's an uncomfortable moment, he says, when the coffee's done, they're still sitting there, and they have a long list of airplanes to get to and things to do. And so when that discomfort is at its zenith, he says to them, hey, listen, look at that lady over there. That's a grandma. She's probably going to see her next grandchild. That person right there, they might be going through cancer treatment and they need to get to. That person right there might be a person trying to get, that person's in the serviceman's uniform and they're trying to get to their first assignment. You carry lives. You carry people to life. What you do, every screw, every wrench that you turn, it has a life attached to it. Pay attention.
Oh, yeah. We had a very similar type instructor in terms of the jet engine, in terms of something, that plane goes down, very similar. That pilot have family.
That's right. That's right. Pay attention.
Right. Like, do you want to be the one?
Put that cell phone down. Don't you even think about it.
Do you want to be the one responsible for that family losing that pilot?
Negative on that one.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, it's very similar. I mean, that's like, but it really is that critical in terms of, like, and a lot of people take it for granted. I don't, because I'm an AV geek, but people who are not AV geeks, they probably don't give it a second thought. But it's a lot that goes into a flight.
A lot.
So, again, at this point, I told you it would go quick. It's already been an hour and a half.
Our time is flown by.
I'm going to have to have you, no pun intended, have to have you come back again for sure.
I'd be
so we continue. And, one of the questions I will have before you go into your promo piece is, what's next? I know you want to take it to a movie.
Ooh, wow.
You want to take it to a movie?
Movie.
There you go.
Anybody know anything? Call us up, 973-720-2738. Call us up.
I know that's right.
Call us up. I'll give you my phone number. So here's the deal. So my website is CaroleHopson.com, JetBlackFoundation.org. Please plan on helping us send 100 Black women to flight school. And it's been an enormous honor to be with you guys on today. I love flying. I loved writing that book. And, it's Bessie Coleman is an American icon and worthy of great things. Our goal is book, movie, 100 Black women in flight school. One more time, JetBlackFoundation.org. Your contribution goes to sending women to flight school and women of African descent. And I'm grateful to you all, and I'm most grateful to you. Mark, thank you for having me.
Well, now, again, thank you for taking the time. Again, I still laugh at the fact when I told her 6:30 in the morning, she said, that's midday for me. I was like, okay, all righty now. All righty then. But anyway, I thank you. Wonderful interview, wonderful energy. Definitely going to have you back.
Thank you.
Had a wonderful time. You got any other books coming up or anything you released?
Well, my publisher's ready for me. She's already got the date done.
All right, so we're going to have you back to talk about the next one. I'm enjoying the book as I get through it. All the characters, Jesse and Abbott and Bessie and Bessie's friends. I wanted to make the quilt for her.
Norma.
Because you're right, Norma. That's it. It's funny in terms of the conversations, because you even get into their detailed conversations there, as they interact with each other. Exactly.
That's right.
So yeah, the girl talk.
She's got a French instructor. Mm-hmm. She's got a German instructor. And the book gets released in London on next month.
Okay.
How about that? Through Cassava Press.
All right.
And we're hoping that it gets to the continent. And let's see, paperback is released this summer, so have a look out for that. August again. And like I said, my publisher's working on me for the next one.
That's right. Well, I tell you, whenever I sent Dr. Barnes a text too. I don't know if he got it or not, but next time I go out, I'm going to tell him. I said, Carol made the show.
Dr. Barnes and Carter.
That's right. I said, Carol made the show.
In Montclair. They've taken care of my eyes for a long time. Very grateful to them.
So, he owns that whole corner now.
He sure does.
Right.
And so does she.
See, that's right. Tanya, that's right.
Dr.
Tanya and Frank, that's right. I went out there. I had to send them a card.
Fabulous.
Whenever I left that day, I had to sent them a congratulations and God bless you card. They own the whole corner now.
They own the whole corner. They employ people.
Yes.
They help people with their vision. And their eyesight. They're
yes,
spectacular.
Indeed. But anyhow, we're done for the moment. And then, like I said, I'm definitely going to have you back.
Gotta land the plane.
I know that's right. We're in descent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, all right, I'm gonna let Carole back into the lobby. I'm gonna put back on the music, and then I'll close out.
Thank
Barry
you.
should be here by
I'll
that
wait for
time.
you outside.
But thank you.
Thank you.